Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Logs Doesn't Need to Be a Four-Letter Word webinar. My name is Nick Cavalancia. I am the VP of Marketing at SpectorSoft. Before we get started, just real quick, I've been in IT a little over 18 years. I'm what my CEO sometimes calls the reluctant VP of Marketing, in that I used to be out in the field doing regular work in IT, and then I guess was pushed into marketing because I had a knack for taking concepts behind solutions and converting into benefits that our customers would understand. And so I've been around for quite a while. I'm also joined today by Jack Doyle. Jack, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience.
There you go. He's excited to be here, I can tell. Jack is one of our very talented systems engineers. Jack's also a very big techie. Jack, what did you tell me earlier? 13, 14 years in the industry?
About 13.
13,
yes,
okay.
sir.
Lucky number 13. So Jack's also...
Okay, 14.
What's that? Fine. Good.
Okay, 14.
Sure. Jack's also a big participant on the Spiceworks community, as well as you've seen him around the web. Sometimes he's on Microsoft's forums and some other places as well. And Jack's going to help me out a little bit today. We're going to talk a little bit about logs and even do a little bit of a demo at the end. So before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about us as a whole. There's 4 things I really want you to know about us. We've been around about 15 years. We are headquartered in Florida. We are privately held. We do have about 36,000 business customers. And I guess of the 5 things, I take that back. We are an 8-time Inc. 500 and 5,000 award winner, so we're a well-established company. I've got 2 other slides here I want to show. One is an award slide. Some of the products that we have are award-winning. And our most recent is ones around SC Magazine and Info Security Products Guide. We're very proud of those as well. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we also do have a number of customers that are well known. The thing that I really want you to put on the customer slide isn't so much the names of the customers, as much as it is the wide range of industry verticals that are represented here. Everything from healthcare to education to public sector, private sector, and so on. And I guess in the case of at least 2 of them, quasi-public private sector in the middle there someplace, hospitality and so on there. Our products are used throughout every industry vertical, because what we're doing is we're actually helping, whether it's going to be issues related to security, productivity, insider threats, external threats, or it could just be focused on IT productivity, IT systems, maintaining performance, and so on. So let's jump in and take a look real quickly at the agenda. And we have 2 basic things here on the agenda for you to see. I want to talk about why is logs a 4-letter word in the first place, and then what we can do to simplify log management. I'm going to both talk about what you can do for free, as well as what you can do as far as a paid solution goes. But before I do that, Jack and I were talking earlier, and I thought I would go ahead and pull up a couple of poll questions just to kind of get a sense of the audience. So the first question that is going to come up here is, what are you using today? And I'll go ahead and launch that poll. And you'll see there's 3 options here. You go ahead and pick one of them that you think is most appropriate for you. Nothing at all. So logs is definitely a 4-letter word for you. You have decentralized native tools, so maybe using something from Windows, maybe you're more of a Linux shop and using something there, whatever the case is, just native tools, or you already have a solution in place. So go ahead and answer those questions. It looks like half of you have already voted, so that's a good start. But we'll wait a couple more seconds, so please answer. That gives us a sense of our audience here to kind of cater the rest of the presentation for you. And interestingly enough, the answers are not, I don't think they're going to shock you, Jock. Jock, listen, I called you Jack. Jock, that's funny. Jack, wow, I guess you're a tech jock. We'll do it that way. I got 75% of people voted, so we'll wait just another minute or so, and then we'll go ahead and close the poll. And I'm going to share the poll response with you guys in the audience, so you can see what it is your peers are doing. Still around almost 80%, so I'm going to another 5 or 10 seconds, and we'll wait. And then I'm going to go ahead and close this poll out and share the results. You can see that 45% of you don't have anything. 38% of you using native tools, which actually doesn't surprise me very much. And then 18% of you have some kind of solution in place. Jack, I think this isn't too surprising. What do you think?
Doesn't surprise me at all.
No, it didn't.
Not a bit.
I was expecting like a 40-40-20
Right.
is kind of where my head was. But so let me hide those results. I got 2 other questions. The next one is just to kind of get a sense of um, what you have to monitor. How bad are logs an issue for you? And that's based on the number of different devices, maybe applications, services, servers, ports, or whatever it is you're looking at. It's how many different devices do you have to monitor logs from? So go ahead and just add in an answer there to the best of your ability. And if you're not sure, well, what is a device? Is that an IP address, or is it a port, or is it every node? Don't worry about that. Just go with what your gut is based on what you think you have to monitor. And I guess in this case, it's more of how many different things do you have to monitor logs from. And it looks like I already got 65% of you have voted. So keep going. Wait another minute or two. Jack, what's your gut on this one? What do you think people are going to mostly answer as?
21 to 50.
Yeah, you're thinking around 21 to 50. Okay. I can see the
Okay.
answers as they come in, so I don't know. We'll see. I'll tell you if you're right or wrong in a minute here. So wait another 30 seconds.
Yeah, I don't see anything yet.
No, you won't. I got it all covered here. All right, so I got about 75%, another 5 seconds or so, and I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share it out with you. And I'm going to go ahead and close that and share the results out. And I don't find the results to be too shocking. It's kind of a split between 1 to 20 and more than 50. And I kind of think that makes sense.
I was completely wrong.
Yeah, I know you're completely wrong, Jack. That's okay. You're human. You learned something new today. If you think about maybe the 1 to 20 there being the people that are just watching servers, most organizations are either going to have a few servers or they've got a lot of servers. It's never so much in the middle. I think the 21 to 50 group is probably where you're getting into. I've got a couple of servers, and I'm watching my firewall, and I've got a couple of workstations and some printers, and you added all that up there, and you've got 30, 40, 50 different devices to look at. One last question here, and that is, this is a multiple option answer. You can answer more than one, but just what's the most pain that you have when it comes to log management? Is it consolidation? Is it storage of archives of logs? Are you having a problem trying to review the log data? Maybe you don't have a real good way of filtering or searching to find just the right entry. Maybe it's setting up alerts and notifications so you can try and address those issues. Or is it just automating responses in some cases where you can, let's say, reboot a service or something along those lines. So in this case, there's more than one answer you can go ahead and check off. And that means that when we look at these responses together, the answers will not add up to 100%. It's just the individual percentages of all of you that are experiencing that problem. And it's interesting, Jack, you and I were talking earlier today, and one of the big pains that Jack brought up was reviewing and filtering the log data, and that's so far in the lead, which doesn't surprise me, because that seems to be a big pain. We got about 70% of you have voted, so I'm going to wait another, I'll call it 5 or 10 seconds here, and get you all checking those boxes. And I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. You can see here that 41% of you have issues just consolidating the logs. And that doesn't surprise me. There's not a lot of great tools that are out there to do it for you. I'm going to show you something for free that you can do today with Windows Server 2008 and above. Storage of log archives. I'm actually kind of surprised that more companies don't require archiving of logs, only because there are usually retention issues when it comes to compliance and so on. But okay, so about a third of you, a little less than a third, are worried about that. Most of you, it's reviewing and filtering the log data, and I think that always is a problem. It's what should I be looking for, or how do I even find that one entry? There are some stuff you can do for free. I'll talk about that as well, but there's not great answers unless you're going to find the right solution. The proper alerts and notifications. What's that, Jack?
Even when you have the right software application, whether it's something of ours or something of someone else's or whatever, you with log retention, you still have the issue of that log data takes a surprising amount of storage space. So that's one thing that I think people run into.
Yeah, which might be one of the reasons
they don't realize keeping 6 or 7 or 8 years worth of log data, no matter what solution you're using, takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, there's a stat out from Gartner where they were talking about, certainly an enterprise company, it was something like a terabyte of data and log data every day kind of a thing. And my numbers are off, but it was something just preposterous like that. And I remember citing that stat at a webinar once, and the guy in the front went, "Yep, sounds about right." So a lot of us live in a world where we've got just a couple of servers, but there are people that are living with terabytes of data on a daily basis. They got to figure out what to do with. So the last two there, I actually kind of tied together in my head from my IT days. Normally, I would have alerts there so I could figure out when I have to fix a problem. But I also would try and automate as much as I could. So if I could restart some service or a daemon or something, or if I could go ahead and reboot a server, if there's cleaning out log file folders, something, I would like to have done that. So I'm a little surprised that the automated responses is so low in comparison to the alerts and notifications. But so that's kind of where the state of the audience is. Let's jump into. Go ahead, Jack.
Sometimes the responses aren't that it's nice to have them, but they're not really the biggest pain point, because once you know something's wrong, sometimes the fix is really easy, whether it's automated or whether you have to do it yourself. The fix is really easy, but like you're talking about, you've got gigabytes of log data in some extreme circumstances to look through, and finding out that there is the problem is sometimes the difficult part. Once you find out that there's a problem, a lot of times it's not that difficult to.
So finding out half the battle, kind of a thing.
You need to know that it's there.
Cool. Let's jump in and talk about a little bit about that, Jack. Let's talk about why logs are a four-letter word in the first place. So the first thing to consider is all the sources that you have to deal with. And when I was building this deck with Jack, we were kind of going through a list of all the different sources, and one of the comments that we talked about was, this almost requires you guys to become somewhat experts on every single platform to a degree where you've got to figure out, okay, what is it I can pull out of there? What's the format it's going to be in, and so on. And then also what data is even pertinent in the first place. And I think the challenge here is to kind of figure out what's important that you want to pull and what's not important that you'd want to pull from these individual sources. And I mean, Jack, what's your take on how do you figure out what's important and what's not important in terms of all these different? I mean, I've only named 7 sources here, or is it 8? I can't count. But there's probably a lot more than that. What's your take on trying to prioritize some of this?
Well, what's important and what's not important is really up to the individual, because there's so many. There are different compliance requirements and so forth, and what's important to one person is not going to be important to another one. That's why there's really no one-size-fits-all solution to what you should be logging and what you should be retaining and how long you should be keeping it. But it's difficult to say. A lot of times what you think isn't going to be important ends up being important after the fact when something is wrong and you need to go back and do some kind of analysis to figure out what happened. Some innocuous-looking log entry from 3 days ago that just said informational on it. You wouldn't normally think that would be important until you have to go back and look at it. So
that's a great point. There was a story.
It's difficult to say, but then there's the obvious stuff, account lockouts, and and types of things that relate to intrusion types of events. Those ahead of time are going to be important, but it's difficult to say what everything that's going to be important is going to be.
It's interesting you bring up the innocuous event entry. There was a story from McAfee a couple months back that got headlines where what started as being just a VPN log entry unraveled itself to be a developer that had outsourced his own job to China and was paying a development firm. He had sent them his VPN token, his access token there with the numbers
certificate or whatever.
Yeah, and so they could gain access to the organization and they could send him files in, and he was basically putting it out his own work. Which
I have not read that.
Yeah,
that is insane.
Yeah, it is insane.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, so the sources here, I look at it this way. You're either going to look at these different sources as being an issue of security or productivity, that kind of thing, like maybe applications having uptime and that sort of thing, keeping users productive, or maybe it's things like firewalls and routers, and that helps on the security side. And so some cases, some of you are probably more interested in logs from the security standpoint. Others are more interested from just a productivity or a performance standpoint. And I think that's one way of at least starting the conversation of what is important, is to look down which of those paths you need, and therefore what sources do you want to look at. So now the next thing, though, in terms of why logs become a 4-letter word is going to be the issue of the formats. I've got just 4 of them up here, and there's a number of other ones. Usually between event logs and syslogs, you got most of everything covered. But then there's also like text logs and so on. And this becomes a little bit of a challenge. I mean, Jack, where do you see most of the problems being here? I mean, I know event logs are kind of taken care of, but what's your take on that?
Event logs and syslogs are known formats. The syslog is kind of a free text format, other than the fact that it's got a date and time and a level, and it's got the word I'm looking for, facility, and then the rest of it's just text. But it's all kind of set in the way it's delivered to whatever you're collecting it in and looking at it in. Text logs can be kind of a bear because you have every application creates its own format. There are a few standard formats out there, but then you've got some really silly applications. I've seen applications, homegrown applications, that will have most of the entries on a single line, and then occasionally, when there's some debug information, there'll be a packet dump, and the one entry in the log can actually take up several lines in the log file. So when you have any kind of tool or utility that reads that information in and presents it back to you, it can be very difficult sometimes to read the information from those log files when there's no specific standardized format for it. So I'd say the difficulty of all of those is probably going to be text logs. They're not that difficult, but if I had to pick one that's more difficult to take care of than the rest of them. And plus you have rotating file names and things like that. IIS, for example, will create a different log file every day. So the name of the file changes, and you have to deal with situations like that. Yeah, not too difficult, but definitely a bit more so than the event logs and the syslogs.
The last part, that's perfect, Jack, because that makes perfect sense to me as well. And I haven't done a lot with text logs. My background was mostly in the event log type of arena, but that makes perfect sense. The last part here is just the tasks that you've got to accomplish for each of these. And I've got 5 of them that are up here. And you think about whenever you're dealing with logs, there's not just one set of tasks. There are 5 different things you've clearly got to do here. You've got to consolidate them so you're not running around from server to server trying to manage the log data that you have. You have the management aspect, which is kind of the issues of like, am I going to store it? Am I going to archive it? How long do I have to maintain it? Am I going to back it up? Am I just going to delete it? That kind of thing. The monitoring of the data, which is always one of the bigger challenges, and that's, of course, looking at all the individual events and trying to figure out which ones you want to be notified of if should they come up. You have the alerting, which is, again, sending you either an email or maybe it's a text message to your phone or something like that when that event comes up. And then, in some cases, remediation. We saw, of course, there was only like 37% of you worried about that, but some kind of automated, how do I fix it automatically? Or in some cases, maybe you don't want it fixed. So for some of you, this might be more like 4 different tasks than 5. So this becomes kind of a problem. There's another aspect to this of where you might not even use logs as your source, and maybe that's part of the problem. So what I'm talking about next is kind of why maybe logs aren't the only way you should be looking at it. The first thing is maybe you should be looking at like your server resources. And what I mean by this is if I ran out of disk space on an SQL server, I'm going to get an error message that says that my drive that had the database on it, maybe the logs couldn't write to the logs, and because it ran out of disk space or something like that. And so I'll get a log file error that's telling me something within SQL specifically that there was a problem related to disk. If I was just watching the disk in the first place and seeing how much disk space was available, I probably would just have been able to fend off the issue if I had an appropriate type of application watching for disk or for memory usage or CPU up at 100%, over 95 for more than this duration of time, whatever. The same thing kind of stands true with services, where maybe I'll look at, let's take in the case of a Windows service. If a service stops, I'd want to be notified just if the service stops. Because if the service stops, maybe there's no way to write an entry to a log file, because the service would have been the one writing the entry to the log file. So if it just stopped abruptly, I don't have any ability to tell that there was a problem with that service. So that might be something else. And then even kind of application-specific responses there, where I want to see if a particular service is responding. Maybe like an example might be, Jack mentioned IIS earlier or something. Maybe I'm going to hit the web port and just see if it actually responds or something like that. Jack, what did I miss here?
Well, Nick, sometimes, like you were saying, it's not a matter of an application not functioning, but an application functioning poorly. If SQL Server is consuming too much CPU or memory resources, then it could be performing very slow. It doesn't mean that it's not performing properly or that there's an error, so you're going to see most likely nothing in your logs for that. So those are the kind of things you want to look for as well, not just that there are errors or issues with your applications, but simply that they're not performing the way that you expect them to. One example you and I were talking about earlier was running out of disk space on SQL Server. So your database grows too big, and then all of a sudden can't write more data to the database. And keeping an eye on that disk space is something that's important as well. And that way you would be able to know about it ahead of time. If you're watching it and you're seeing, for example, let's just take a 100 gigabyte drive and you're consuming 3 gigabytes a day, you can start to anticipate when you're going to have issues with that database filling up that disk.
That's a good point, Jack. The anticipation is important. That makes a lot of sense. If you can anticipate there's going to be a problem, that's something where logs are always reactive, and if you're watching maybe the resources, it's proactive. One last example here of watching maybe something other than logs would be if, let's say, you've got an application server on one side of the country, one side of the U.S., and you've got a user on the other side, maybe located, it happens to be where your monitoring is occurring from. If you are testing the application response, then maybe I could see there's actually a connectivity problem from, call it the LA office to the New York office or something, where the application itself isn't going to tell me there's anything wrong, but there's certainly a user that's having an issue. So sometimes being able to sort of either use it as a proactive layer or proactive measure of ensuring that the services are up, but also it can be utilized as a way of seeing is there maybe an application availability issue as well. So let's jump into a couple things that you can do here. First thing, when it comes to taking a look at whatever solution you use, I have 3 criteria that I always come up with. It's got to be scalable. You guys had everything from 1 to 20, 20 to 50, and more than 50. It's got to be scalable to a large number of devices. It has to be centralized, so that way you're not doing it across multiple servers and doing the same task over and over again. A good example in the real world would be, I don't want to have to go to each of my Exchange servers and then set up all the same task alerts over and over again for each one because I have 12 of them, or whatever the case is. And then the last thing...
Well, Nick, it depends on where those Exchange servers are in the world, because that could be a nice trip.
Yes, okay, so one's in Tahiti. You're going to definitely want to do that one, not via RDP. Okay, fine.
Right.
Granted, Jack.
Right.
The last one is automated. As much as you can, you'd want to automate this process. I'm assuming that all of you have much better things to do than to watch for the 6289 error in an event log or something. You'd rather just automate, set it up once, and move on and go to the far more important projects that need to get done. So let's keep that kind of in mind as we walk through first talking about when you're trying to simplify log management, what's free. And so the first thing I came up with, and this is just in the context of Windows, because I presume most of you are running Windows, is the Windows Event Viewer. So the quick screenshot comes up next where you can see I've got my my Windows event. You guys have all seen this before. And there is actually some capabilities you've got when you deal with things like filtering the current logs. You've got even the find where you can search through. And on a per server basis, that's actually pretty good. But if you take a look down in the lower right, I'm going to put a little red box around here for a second. You can see that you can attach a task to a given event, and it's based on a couple different criteria. So the next screenshot that comes up that you see is that the fact that it's got the individual actions are going to be tied to a specific event. The only downside, of course, is it's tied to a single event ID. There's not a lot of flexibility here, but I can do both some notification, because you can see here I can send an email, I can display a message. I can also do some remediation by starting a program, maybe launching a script in PowerShell or something along those lines. So there is some stuff just free with Event Viewer that has some nice abilities within the confines of the Windows world. The other thing to keep in mind, of course, is it's done on a per server, per event basis, and that does kind of limit you to a pretty powerful degree. The next thing, go ahead, Jack.
If you only have one server and one event that you care about, you're in business.
Yes, exactly.
It is an awesome solution.
Thank you, Captain Obvious. Excellent, Jack.
Sure.
So the next thing is Windows Event Forwarding. If you're not familiar with this started in Windows 2008. It does also support pulling data from Server 2003 servers, but the service itself is in Server 2008. And the idea here is that you can set up event forwarding or consolidation of event logs and pull that event data together. You can see here in a second, I'm going to go ahead and put up a red box up here where I can select certain events. I've also defined previously up at the top of there, whether it's source computer initiated or collector initiated, and which servers are involved, and so on. But in the next screenshot I show you here, you'll see that I can actually establish a query of what it is I'm going to pull in, and I can consolidate logs together. And then in concept, that mixed with my basic event log functionality that I showed you in the previous slide, I could set up a single set, or I shouldn't say single, a consolidated single server set of event tasks to watch for and respond to. So there is an ability here to even take these two technologies together that we normally take for granted and put it together. The only downside is the Windows Event Forwarding typically has kind of a lifespan of a couple of servers. So it's not meant to be an enterprise-wide type solution. Of course, it is, again, limited to only Windows, so you are somewhat limited in that scope. But as part of always doing these webinars, Jack and I both always try, we talk about this a bunch, we try and strive that let's give some value. So I don't just want this to be a your life sucks by my product kind of webinar, because no one wants to go to those. So you do have some stuff you can do for free. Go ahead and fully take advantage of that. You can search for Windows Event Forwarding on the web, and you'll definitely find some how-to stuff on Microsoft's websites. But let's look at how they measure up. And you can, again, in the context of Windows, we've got those 5 tasks here that we want to do: consolidation, management, monitoring, alerting, and remediation. And I tried to put together what I think is kind of a fair assessment. You obviously can't do consolidation without the event forwarding, but it's not really scalable. You don't really have any management of the logs per se built in. I mean, you can do some basic backing up, I guess, of the EVT files, but I didn't really consider that management. I'd want something that's more automated that says after a certain period of time, archive it or delete it or whatever the case is. And then monitoring, you've got what I kind of called like yellow check boxes. They weren't green, like yes, it definitely does it. They were kind of like, well, it sort of does it. They're per event, per server in a lot of cases. The alerting is very basic, of course. The remediation is maybe not basic is the wrong word as I think about it, because you could set up a pretty fancy script. So, but let's say it's as only good as your scripting abilities, or as long as the issue at hand is something as simple as like I need to run a net start command and restart some kind of service. So let's jump over and kind of talk about what SpectorSoft has to offer a little bit, and maybe how it differentiates a bit. What we want to do is we're going to show you a little bit about Server Manager. Jack's going to do a quick demo in a minute or so. And if you look down the bullet list, you see the first one, of course, is Event Log Management. But then I have all these other capabilities. We didn't call it Server Manager because it just does event logs. We did call it Server Manager because it's managing every aspect of the server and taking a look at that, figuring out what we can do to automate remediation. It's looking at applications, at resources, at disk. It has those actions built in. It's a templatized, centralized type of platform that allows you to customize exactly what it is you want to consolidate, what you want to manage, what you want to monitor, and what you want to do about it, and how you want to be alerted, and so on. So I want to just have Jack take a couple of minutes. Jack, why don't you go ahead and I'll let you kind of take the con here, and we'll do a quick demonstration of the product, and then we'll kind of sum this whole thing back up.
Sure. So why don't we start? I have 2 installations of Server Manager here. One I've had running for a while that I use for other demo purposes that has a lot of data in it already, and we'll come back to that when we want to start filtering some things and looking at some data. But let's start with a brand new installation of Server Manager that really doesn't have anything in it yet, so that we can see how easy it is to just write fresh on a new install. We're going to add a few servers here. I've got 4 Windows servers. Unfortunately, my laptop can only run so many. So we've got 4 Windows servers here we're going to add into Server Manager. We're going to go ahead and collect the application system and security event logs from those very quickly, consolidate those, and just look at them here. That's a great way to start. So if we look under computers, devices, and hosts, we're going to see that I expand that and nothing happens because there's nothing there. So I'm going to start by creating a group. I have OCD and like to keep everything nice and neat. You know that, Nick. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a nice little folder called Windows Servers, and I'm going to throw all 4 of my Windows servers into that folder. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to say not assign, I'm going to say new computer or device. We can add anything we want here, IP addresses, host names. We can even put in www.google.com if we want and start pinging that every 20 seconds and see how long Google stays up. We can browse Active Directory to find the servers we want very easily. Here are 2 of my computers, and the other 2 are in domain controllers. And so what I'm going to do is hit OK. Got those 4 computers selected. OK again, and now those 4 computers are added into Server Manager, and they are going to do absolutely nothing at this point. So the first thing we want to do is create a configuration template. Templates are awesome in that we can create templates to do all kinds of different things in Server Manager, and this goes to what Nick was talking about as far as scalability. What I can do is create one template that consolidates the application security and system event logs. Now, I'm just mentioning those 3 because every Windows server has them. We could actually, and we'll see this in a moment, we can consolidate any event log on a Windows server, even if it's one created by one of your own third-party applications. But we can then assign the configuration templates that we create to individual servers if we want to. Maybe we just have one server that has a particular thing we want to do. But if we put our servers into groups, and they can exist in multiple groups, by the way, then we assign these templates to those groups. All the computers or hosts inside that group will inherit those configuration templates. And once a configuration template is assigned to a host, we refer to it as a monitor. Basically, it's an instance of a template.
So Jack, real quick. Hey Jack, also
yes.
Just to mention, you mentioned event logs a bunch. Thought since you're just kind of at the beginning of this, just looking at where your mouse is even right now, just to mention for the audience, talk a little bit about the sys logs and the text logs to get the full breadth of what it is that Server Manager can monitor.
Oh, sure. So Server Manager not only can monitor your Windows event logs, but it also can consolidate information from any of your syslog devices and also logs that are created in text files from applications. IIS is an example of one. SQL Server puts a lot of its information in the Windows event log, but it also keeps error information in a text file-based log. And that's one of those tricky logs that uses multiple lines for the same entry sometimes. And we have ways that we can work around that in Server Manager. I actually have that configured in the other installation, and I'll show you that too. That's really easy to do and quite nice. But just for our purposes, we're going to look at event logs here for just a moment. We have a couple of different templates here that look very much alike, event log consolidation and monitoring. And then we have another one called event log monitor. And you could use the same one on the same servers if you want. Event log monitor is real time. So for example, if you want to know immediately when a user account is locked out, you might create an event log monitor template that looks for that event and apply it to your domain controllers. And then it'll watch those event logs in real time for when that event appears, and then it could send you an email or display a message box, which is what I usually do in my VMs because it works a lot better for demonstration purposes than email. Plus, I don't have a mail server. But that's what the monitor is. It's more real time. It doesn't do any consolidation. It just watches for those events as they occur. The consolidation does not occur in real time. It occurs every X number of minutes or X number of hours. And let's create one here real quick. So the first thing we're going to do when we go to create a new event log consolidation and monitoring template is we can give it a name. I'll just name this one app sys-sec. So that way we know right off the bat, just by looking at it in the Object Explorer, what it is and what it does. It's enabled, and here we specify how often we want this particular template to execute against each host it's assigned to. We have 2 types of schedules in Server Manager. We have fixed and range schedules. If I were to say every 1 hour and use a fixed schedule, it would execute at the top of the hour. So if I've got 100 servers that I'm collecting this information from, Server Manager is going to go out and it's going to grab that event log information at the top of the hour for all 100 of those. That could potentially cause a bottleneck on your network or resource. It could consume a lot of resources, on your Server Manager server. But if that's your requirement for compliance or whatever, that you get them right at the top of the hour, then we can do that. That's not a problem. But if it's just that you receive them once an hour, you can use an every hour range schedule, and it'll take all 100 of those and distribute them evenly throughout the hour. So each one will be collected once an hour. It just doesn't necessarily mean it'll be the top of the hour. So that's a pretty nice piece of functionality. If I go under logs, now we're going to see a list of just a few of the Windows event logs that exist on every server, but we can select the server from our environment, and it'll show us all of the logs that exist on that server if we want to do that. And we can select any of these that we want to. We can also see any of the Microsoft application logs. If there are any third-party event logs that any of your other applications have installed, they'll show up here as well, as long as you've selected that computer that they're on. And if you just want to add any random Windows event log, you can type it in the Add Log button at the bottom here. So any event log, regardless of whether it's a Microsoft event log or a third party, is fine. But we're going to go ahead and take our application, our security, and our system event logs and consolidate those. We're going to go over to the Consolidation and Monitoring tab now, and we can select different options for each of these logs, but I'm just going to leave it on all. We can choose to save all entries that we receive, or we could choose to apply a filter and only keep entries that meet that filter. So if you don't have a requirement to keep everything but only certain events, let's say you only want warnings and errors, or you only want audit failures, then you could create filters, and we do have filters for those two examples already built in the product, as a matter of fact. But you can create any kind of filter you want, and you can filter what entries you're going to keep. So you don't have to keep everything if you don't want to. Just to make things quicker, I'm going to save only the last couple of days worth of logs the first time through, and then subsequent checks will only receive logs that are new, log entries that are new. We can clear the remote event log if we want to. We can create a retention policy template. I can do that really quickly. I'll just say I want to keep all of my entries for 30 days. We can also archive those off after a period of time into an archive database and keep them indefinitely. The only real limitation here is not associated with Server Manager, but with the amount of space that you have available for your SQL Server database. So that's it. And we do support storing information in Microsoft SQL. Well, let's start with the file system. We do support storing all this information in the file system. We don't recommend it because it's kind of slow. Microsoft SQL Server, we also support storing all of the collected information in Oracle and also in MySQL, which is a great alternative to Microsoft SQL Server if you are an environment that does not have Microsoft SQL Server, and MySQL is a great alternative and doesn't cost you anything. We can also apply post-consolidation filters and actions if we want. So for different events that it sees, we can have it send out an email if we want. So as it consolidates these, for each error that we see, we want to send an email to somebody. Or if we see 3 errors in the period of 5 minutes, we want to send an email or a notification. And then over on Advanced, I'm not going to do anything here, but there are some other options. So now I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to get a warning because I have not applied this template anywhere. I understand that, so that's not a problem for me. So now what I want to do is take this one template that I've configured to do exactly what I need it to do, and I want to apply it to all these servers at the same time. So whether there are 4 servers in this group or 400 servers in this group, I'm just going to take my template, I'm going to drag it up here to this Windows Servers folder, I'm going to drop it here and say link. So now it's linked it and it's applied it to all of those servers. So now, within the next little while, I think it's set to every hour, it would go out and it would consolidate all of those event logs from all of those servers. I can take this template here, right-click it, and I'll just have it do that for us very quickly instead of waiting. And what it's going to do is it's going to go out to all 4 of those servers, and it's going to consolidate all of the event log entries that it finds on those servers into our database. And then what we can do is we can look at those event log entries in one consolidated view. So we can see all of the entries from whatever event logs we want with whatever filters we want applied in one view. What's nice about that is if you're looking at all of your servers separately, you might have an event over here that doesn't really mean too much to you, and then you go to another server and you see that event over there too, and you see it on a third server, and you may not realize unless you're looking at all of them in the same view that those all occurred at the same time. So maybe there's something important going on there that you're not necessarily aware of. So we've collected all these event logs now, and if we go down to log repositories and expand our repository, we're going to see all of these servers listed down here and all of the event logs that have been collected. So I can select on any of these and look at them one at a time, or I can just merge from my repository. And merge just means we're going to consolidate multiple sources of event logs together into one view. And I'm going to search here, and I'm going to say I want to see all of my application logs and all of my system logs. So I'm going to find those, and I'm going to select them. I can apply any filters right off the bat here that I want before I run my query, but in this case I'll just say OK. And so now what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the application and the system logs in one consolidated view against all 4 of these servers. In fact, if I take the computer and move it warning and error events. We can uncheck that. Now we just see warnings and errors. We can flag any of these events so that we can review them later. We can email events that we find here. We can search. We can take notes, whatever we'd like to do. So this is very nice in that you've got one good consolidated view of all of the event log data from all of your servers in one place.
Hey, Jack.
We can very easily. Did you have a question, Nick?
Yeah, let's show them a little more of the filtering of the data, since that was one of the bigger pain points for the audience. Just what are all the ways they can search through, filter, and so on. You already shown them some of them, but I just wanted you to continue on on that vein for a moment.
Sure, I've got a few extra filters in my other installation here, so let's go ahead and disconnect from this one. And now that I've shown you how we're going to create that, and how quickly we can go from having nothing to having this information consolidated, I'm going to go ahead and connect to this other installation real quick, where I've got a whole bunch of, I've created some filters above and beyond the ones that come with Server Manager, which I can share with you guys if you guys start to evaluate Server Manager and would like those. We have a feature we just recently added to the product where we can export filters and import them. So if any of you guys want to reach out to me, if you see something that you like, and I can send you the filters that I've created, if that's something that you'd like to see. So let's go back in here to log repository. I'm going to say merge again, and I'm going to take my security logs. So I've got 4 security logs from my 4 servers. I'll go ahead and select those, pull those up. I get a lot of events. I get a lot of unimportant stuff because this is just a lab, and I just generate a whole bunch of garbage. But so now I can go up here and I can select my filters. And what I can see, for example, is account management. I may not have any from today, so it's going to go to the last day that it found any event. So now I can choose this, and I can see here's an account that was locked out back on June 3rd. That was the last event that actually met that filter criteria. You create any filters that you want, and then you can apply those filters. And creating filters is really easy. We got a couple of different ways to do it. I'm just going to select new filter and show you here. We have simple event log filters where you just give it a name and then add criteria into these little boxes. Very easy to do. If you're looking for something more complex, or you're not more complex or difficult to work with, but maybe your filter is a little more complicated than that, we do have a complex event log filter where you can go in here, you can actually create groups, and you can nest your criteria any way that you want to. One example that I created, and I'll show you that real quick, is going to be for password resets. So here's that filter. So I'm looking for the Windows 2008 event or the Windows 2003 event that is related to a password being reset. Also, when a password is reset, you get an account has been modified event, and it'll be either a 4738 or a 642, and I'm looking for these strings within those events, or I do not want these strings, so I only want the ones where the password was reset. So I've created groups here, and I've nested them here to find just the events that I want. And I'll show you how the real-time monitoring works as well. So what I did was, if I go under Template, Log Retention, I have an event log monitor right here for critical security events that I created. So if I go into this template, this one's going to monitor my event logs in real time. Just going to monitor the security log. I can save resources by only monitoring the logs that I know that my events are going to appear in. And I've specified that I want to monitor for these filters. So I created the filters, and then I created the actions that are going to take place when an event matches that filter. And they're applied very easily here. You take your filter, you can fire the action every time an entry occurs that matches the filter, or if it occurs a certain number of times over a certain period of time. So let's say, for example, you're watching for accounts being locked out. Accounts get locked out all the time. It just happens. So if an account gets locked out once, it's not really that big of a deal because, like I said, it happens all the time. But if you're getting 10 account lockouts in the course of 20 minutes, it might be important to you. So you could set a threshold on that if you wanted to, and then you specify the action that you want to take place. And I can show you exactly how that works. In my lab, what I've done is just use message boxes that pop up on the screen. You can do that also. That might be what you want. You might want an email. That's an option as well. I just chose message boxes because it's a lot easier to demonstrate. So we're going to do a run as. We're going to do something fun here and try to run Notepad as Will Smith. After 5 attempts, it should lock his account out, and then we should immediately get a notification. So I'll just take this, put in a last password here. I'm going to hit enter, and we should immediately see, or within a couple of seconds, see a notification that that event occurred in our event log on a completely different server. And there it is. So we do have a notification now indicating that a user account has locked out. This is the information straight from the Windows event. We've got the security identifier. We've got this is of the server where the account lockout took place, which is my domain controller. Then we've got Will Smith here, and we've got his security identifier here. And we just had it pop up a message box, but we could have it do anything that we like. So that's an example of the real-time event log monitoring. We were talking a little bit ago about text file-based log consolidation, and I'll show you an example of that. I do have a template here where I'm consolidating the SQL error log. So if we look at that template, I've named it just so I know exactly what it is. It's going to consolidate it every 5 minutes. And the log file is going to be this one down here. It's in the program files in my SQL Server folder, and it's called error log. It doesn't have an extension, which is fine. But the issue with that error log, if we go look at it in Notepad or something, let's just pull this up real quick here. I'll show you what's wrong with this particular log file. Yeah, so the program files. Sorry about this. Where is that? Right here. Log and error log. There's no extension, so every time we open it, we have to tell it what we want to open it with. So here's our log file. Some of these entries look quite nice, like these most of these entries. It's 1 entry per line. Everything is good and kosher. It's got our date and time. There's a source where the log entry originated from, and then the log information. But look at a couple of them up here. The one that introduces SQL Server, basically the welcome to SQL Server, I've just started up log entry, consumes 3 lines and then a blank line. And then we've got one down here where SQL Server actually starts up and shows the startup parameters. That consumes 4 lines. So those entries, when you're reading in 1 line per entry, can be kind of an issue, because this itself right here is not a log entry. It's part of a previous log entry. And we have some ways to work around things like that in Server Manager. If I go over to function, we've got a few options here for the log file, and we can have multiple log files in the template, and that's why the drop down is up there. I'm using a logical file name, and what that doesn't really do much for my SQL Server log, because it's always called error log. But if you were consolidating your IIS log, which has a different log file each day, what this does is it gives it a logical file name inside the database. So they're all going to be consolidated to the same logical file, which we would call IIS log, because that's what it is. Just because the file name changed doesn't mean we necessarily consider it to be something different. Entry pattern is what I was getting at here just a moment ago. So our entries are going to start with this regular expression. So I'm going to copy that to my clipboard in case I lose it. I can very easily put it back. I'm going to turn that off, and now if I hit test, this is going to pull up the first 10 entries from that error log file so we can see if everything's working. But we can see here, there's our first line, but now here are these other parts of that same first entry, but it's treating those as separate entries, which is kind of a hassle. So what I did was I created a regular expression that just looks for this date and time. So if I turn that regular expression back on and say the entries will begin with this regular expression, now we test it again, and we can see that each entry is correctly portrayed, including the one with the startup parameters and the welcome to SQL Server. So now we consolidate this log every few minutes, and we can view that just like we would any other logs in Server Manager. I'll just go right down here to my log repository. If I expand out the server where that log exists, Windows servers, it's on this one here, text log, we're going to see the logs that we're consolidating from that server, and I'll just view those log entries. And here we go. Here are SQL Server log entries. And you could also collect, if you have multiple SQL servers, I only have one in my lab here, but if you had multiple SQL servers, you could consolidate those together just like you do Windows event logs. So you could look at SQL Server logs from all of your different SQL servers together, as opposed to having to look at those one at a time. And I've also got another example of a text file-based log we can look at on my Linux server here. We have a Squid cache proxy. It's a proxy server, and I do have a log for that, and it generates a lot of entries. So you can see here we're collecting that and can view that, and you can also create filters against your text file-based logs as well. One example would be this Cisco intrusion detection system log file. I just have a few sample entries here. I do not have a Cisco intrusion detection system in my lab, but I do have a few sample entries from one, so effectively I've got the information here. And you can see here, my assumption is that severity 5 are probably the higher severity issues on a Cisco intrusion detection system, so you can create filters for that. So I could say I only want to see severity 5 issues, and now we apply that filter, and we only see what's important to us. And again, we could be notified when certain events meet these filter criteria.
Hey, Jack, let me jump in here because we only got a couple more minutes left. If you could take
Sure.
your left-hand object explorer, and kind of expand that a little bit so people can see it. One of the things that I want to summarize that Jack has been kind of hinting at all along, but I want to kind of tie it all together in a nice, neat bow, is Jack started talking about templates when we started. One of the best features about Server Manager that I loved when I first saw it was that everything is, in essence, and maybe not every aspect, but almost everything in here is templated. So everything from what you're going to monitor, to the definitions of the filters, to the schedules, to groups of servers, to what actions you're going to perform. All these things are all templated so that you can reuse them again and again. So, for example, if you wanted to define that I want to get an email, and that's your action whenever a specific, let's say, event pops up, you could create that definition for that template, or it could be that I always want to record, I always want to monitor from 5 in the morning till 9 at night, or whatever the case is. You can define that one time and apply this over and over again. So Jack's he's a complex example of how to pull in an SQL Server set of data. I can define that template one time and then apply it to all my SQL servers, so I don't have to do this multiple times. And that's one of the real benefits to you guys, where you don't have a lot of time to do this. And although Jack's throwing a lot of things out at you going, look, it can do this, it can do that, it can do this other thing, the idea is that you're going to do this once, and then you never have to do this again. You've defined the template, so when you want to go to the next SQL server or the next text log that uses the same format or whatever it is, you already have the time frames defined. You already have the filter defined. You already have the consolidation defined. You already have the actions defined. And now it's a matter of just going, okay, that time frame, that filter, that consolidation, that action, and you're done. And I'm, of course, making it sound all nice and rosy, but that's at least the intent of Server Manager.
But it is nice and rosy.
It is nice. Thank you, Jack. So, Jack, I'm going to give you like 1 minute left, and then we got to jump and go to questions. I want to respect everyone's time. Is there anything else that you really want to show within the next 60 seconds or so?
Yeah, we used an example earlier of monitoring resources, which we haven't talked about in the demo at all. Just really quickly, I've got a configuration template that I created to monitor disk space on all of my different servers. So we can look at that real quick. I'll just run very quickly through how the template's configured. We're going to check every hour. We're going to check all of the disks. We set our thresholds. I want to go into a warning state when it falls beneath 20% free and critical when it goes beneath 10. And there are actions you can take and all that good stuff. But what we did was we applied that template to our Windows servers folder, and it applies then to all of our servers. We can select on any of these guys, and when it has a cog on it, that's a monitor. I talked earlier about how when a template gets associated with a host, it creates a monitor, which is a single executable unique instance of that template. We can select one of these. I can take this one and say Explore. It's going to show me every time it checked what the results were. I can hit Explore and browse through the file system on that server. I can also look at a historical chart, and since this is just a lab, not a lot changes. So you guys will probably have a lot cooler chart than I do. But what I can see is over the course of an hour, how much space has changed here, free space, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. And what is really cool about this is if you're checking often enough and you're storing the information long enough, it's going to estimate when that disk is going to fill up. and it's telling me that at the current rate, if I kept doing what I was doing now, my disk is going to fill up right before Christmas of next year. So I should ask my wife for a hard drive for Christmas. And any of the other disks that you're looking at, you could select here and view that information. You can change the time period and so forth. You can also get any of the information that you've collected in Server Manager in reports. We do have a nice set of reporting features in the product. We are running low on time, so I don't want to spend a ton of time here. But for example, our disk space, we can create a report and view that. It'll show us very easily against all of our servers, where our disk space stands. We can also see it with those trends if we want to create one that way too. These can be viewed in Server Manager like we are now. They can be emailed to you. They can be dropped onto a share as PDFs. All of the functionality that you would expect is there. I'm just showing you one little piece of it.
And Jack, let me throw one last thing up on the screen there for these guys.
Yes.
Why don't you show them just making a new template and just show them the list of all the things that they could monitor, and then that
sure,
way.
We can go through that very quickly here. And I totally just clicked that, and it's going to run every template.
New template, there you go. And let me run through this for the audience here. So if you look at it as Jack expands all of these, you've got everything. He showed you the logs for event logs, for file consolidation, for sys logs, text logs, and then if you scroll down a little bit, you see we have everything from disk monitors to directory usage, and then some of the stuff we never even got to really even talk about was stuff like where you've got internet server monitors. So if you look at it, it already has predefined things for email for like POP and IMAP and HTTP for web monitors, database monitors, even the resource performance monitors down at the very bottom where you've got things like memory. We already did disk space, but you've also got CPU there towards the bottom of the list underneath the databases. So there's a wide range of stuff that Server Manager has for you to be able to monitor within one platform. So again, don't just think of this as an event log solution. It's going to comprehensively allow you to monitor not just one server, but every aspect of your network, presumably from one spot. So let's jump back to the slides here and just kind of summarize, because we're coming near the top of the hour. I am going to take some questions. We're going to try and answer them as much as we can. Just to kind of quick summarize, the log data that you've got, it's overwhelming, it's unwieldy, there's a lot of detail in there. It is the precursor to big data like we hear today. As long as you've got a scalable, centralized, and automated solution in play, it should be easy. And of course, if you want to get away from logs being a four-letter word, having the right tool is going to make the difference. So the next steps that we want to encourage you to take is to take a look at SpectorSoft.com. Next slide, Jack. There we go. There's a 20-day evaluation of Server Manager that you can take a look at, fully functional. Jack, any commentary on the 20-day eval? Any limitations that I'm just not aware of that the audience needs to be aware of? Or
I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it's limited to 20 devices during those 20 days. But that should be, enough to at least determine if it's going to be suitable for you. So.
Cool. And
that's the only limitation that I'm aware of, and there's no license key required. You just install it and go. It has the eval built right into it.
And our definition of a device is IP. So if you guys are thinking, as you saw all those different things you can monitor, and you're going, well, I can monitor disk and CPU and an event log on a server, that's still one device, even though you're monitoring multiple things. So don't get caught up in that. Let's quickly just try and take a couple of questions. We are giving away an iPad mini in a little bit, but I'm going to take some questions first, answer just a few of them. Then we'll give away the iPad mini, and then we'll finish up with the rest of the questions before we move on. So if I look at these real quick, one was, well, Jason asked, and I kind of talked about this, but Jack, why don't you go in a little more detail? Jason asked, looking at your pricing, what do you consider a node?
Okay, a node is going to be any device that you are either monitoring or collecting information from. So if you add a firewall and you want to ping that firewall and you want to receive syslog entries from that firewall, the firewall represents a node. If you add a Windows server, you're going to collect CPU and memory utilization information. You want to monitor some services. You want to consolidate some text file logs and some Windows event logs from that Windows server. That Windows server is one node.
Okay, good answer. So Mike asks about
any device that you add under computer, devices, and hosts is going to be considered the node.
Okay. So Jack, the next question comes from Mike. He's asking about Windows Server 2012 events.
What about them?
Are they
We do
supported, I
support
presume?
Windows Server 2012.
Say it again, sorry?
We do support Windows Server 2012 and Windows 8. So I'm not sure what the question is exactly, but we do support Windows Server 2012.
Okay, Todd is asking, can
You
it
can certainly
correlate?
email me if there are more specifics to the question that I'm just not picking up on, and I'll be happy to answer in as much detail as necessary.
The next question's from Todd. He's asking about, can it correlate with other security equipment such as FireEye?
If FireEye, I'm not sure what he means by correlate with the other security equipment. There's no automatic correlation between the different devices that we collect log information from. If you're asking whether we can consolidate the log entries from FireEye, the answer, without knowing any of the specifics about FireEye, is going to be most likely yes. If it can send its log information to a syslog server, most firewalls and intrusion detection systems and things like that can. And one of the reasons you want to, as opposed to logging on those devices, is let's say your firewall gets hacked by somebody. The first thing that they're going to do, I'm not a hacker, I've never hacked anything, but if I were a hacker, I would think the first thing I would do when I got into your firewall is I would clear the logs so I kind of cover my tracks. But if those log entries are being sent in real time as they occur to a syslog server somewhere, clearing out that log isn't going to do me any good. Most likely, whatever device you're referring to, the FireEye device, is going to be able to send its syslog information to a remote host, in this case, Server Manager, and then you could review that information in Server Manager. You could create filters to look for whatever specific information you're looking for, and even notify you when those events occur.
All right, so the next question...
I hope that answers your question.
I hope so as well. Garrett is asking about the licensing for Server Manager, about nodes versus the number of packs. And we get that all the time, Garrett. Jack already talked about the number of nodes, which in essence kind of boils down to an IP address for a device that you want to monitor. Then we also have the number of servers, and those just have to do with the number of instances of Server Manager that are doing monitoring. Sometimes people have bandwidth.
Right, the number of installations of the product. Some of the monitoring, like the CPU and memory utilization, even collecting the event logs, uses a Microsoft technology called WMI. We're agentless. We use WMI to collect that information from the event logs and from the Windows servers. Now, collecting the file information and file consolidations, syslogs, things like that, they work differently. But WMI, occasionally we find that customers have multiple sites and their firewalls are between the sites are filtering WMI, so when you have a Server Manager installation in one location, it can't communicate using WMI to another location. Not a limitation of our product, it's just some filtering that they're doing. So they want to install Server Manager in one location to collect information from servers there, and they want to install Server Manager in a second location to collect information from there. So in that case, they would buy a multiple installation pack where it's discounted insanely over buying two single installations of Server Manager. So if you look on our website and you saw the 5-pack 20 nodes, for example, what that means is you can have 5 completely unique installations of Server Manager, and each one is licensed for 20 nodes. That's exactly what that is.
Let's go ahead and give away the iPad Mini, because I know some people are hanging on for dear life for that. We'll go ahead and give that away. But then there's still some more questions after this, and Jack and I are going to go on for at least maybe another 5 minutes or so and answer some more questions. Trying to respect your time at the same time, trying to make sure everyone benefits from the questions being asked, because they're all really good questions. So the winner of the iPad Mini is Mark B, as in boy, from Chicago, Illinois. So, Mark, I'll probably be reaching out to you myself. This is Nick, and see about if there's maybe an Apple store close by, and you can just go pick it up. If not, we'll ship it to you. So, either or. So, Mark B. So, but let's continue on with a couple other questions that we have as well. And we'll stick with those. The Mimi asks and says, I'm a little concerned about the evaluation constraints. What if you need more time, or you really need to demo it across your enterprise or a large segment thereof? Jack, what do you normally do in a situation like that when you're talking to customers?
Give me a call and I'll take care of you.
Okay, good answer.
We can take care of things like that on a case-by-case basis. If you've got a compelling reason why 20 days or 20 nodes, maybe 20 days is still okay, but 20 nodes isn't, or 20 nodes is okay, but 20 days isn't, just give me a call or send me an email. Let's talk about it a little bit, and I will do whatever we need to do to accommodate you.
Cool. Sanjeev asks, what type of monitoring does a server manager do for SQL server databases listed under databases? Do you want to go into just a little bit of detail there?
Sure. What we can do for SQL Server, we don't do any monitoring of the actual databases themselves. Some of the different things you can monitor as far as SQL Server goes is we can verify the service is up and running. We can monitor resource utilization, and I'm going to steal Nick's screen here again for a second. I have a couple of things here in my lab. We go under SQL Server. First, I'm monitoring that the different SQL Server processes are running, and if I select the right place, the SQL Server service, verifying that the SQL Server service is actually up and running. I have two of the services here. I know SQL Server has several other services, but I just have two, for example. We can also monitor the SQL Server process itself and the resources that process is consuming, and this is quite nice because you can look here and see over a period of time the CPU and memory utilization for that particular SQL Server instance. We can also monitor SQL Server itself, and what I mean by this is what you can do is create a template that runs a query, and it can run it against any database you want it to. In this case, what I did was I just ran a simple query that uses my Server Manager history database and asks it how many tables do you have in your database, and then it just returns back the number of tables that are there. And what this is, I'm not doing anything with that result. There's really nothing to do with the result. The purpose of the template is to verify that a database is available and responding to queries. So you could write any query that you want there, and you expect the result. So that's quite nice, and that's some of the different, in addition to the log consolidation, that's some of the monitoring that we can do for SQL Server.
So Greg asks, what if I wanted to keep track of, Greg says, what if I want to keep track of folder and file adds, changes, and deletes as far as who did what and when?
That's going to be, we can do that. We do that through the Windows event logs. If you turn on object access auditing in Windows Server, and then you enable that on the different folders that you want to audit. And we do have object access reports in Server Manager. If I go down under reports, go to, where am I looking for? File system access. I've got one for my department shares here. I can hit view report, and I'm not looking back far enough, as a matter of fact, because I haven't done anything in that folder in a while. So let's do this. See if we get anything. Yeah, so here we go. So now we've got the different events for when files and folders are written to or deleted. So here's where a document was deleted, and I can double click this, and it'll show me who did that, the administrator. So we do report on that information, though it does utilize the events that are created in the Windows security log, provided you enable and configure object access auditing on your servers.
Jack, let's go to the next question.
Great question.
Bamir asks, does the product require an agent installed on a node that is monitoring and collecting logs? And also, do you support a hybrid cloud environment?
I'll answer the first part of the question first. There are no agents with Server Manager. Everything uses native API calls. The disk monitoring uses just Windows file sharing, which is nice because you can monitor disks on Windows servers, on Linux servers as well if they're shared out through Samba. I'm doing that in my lab. Everything else is done for Windows servers is done through WMI. Other things like monitoring a POP3 or IMAP or SMTP or HTTP are all just done through regular native network calls. There are no agents. There aren't even any agents available. One thing I would like to see in a future version of the product, though I can't promise it, but I am pushing for an agent. I would like to see an agent as an option because, when you have agents, there are some additional things that you might be able to collect, and it might be easier to gather certain things. But we do not do anything with any agents right now. Everything is completely agentless. What was the second part of the question, Nick?
Cloud, hybrid cloud.
I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to there. If you have a server in the cloud, I've dealt with several customers recently who do have situations like that where they have servers hosted at Rackspace and so forth, and they have full VPN access to those servers. So it's almost like they're on their own LAN, except they're not. And if that's the case, as long as you have the right, access to reach those servers, then you could certainly collect the same information. If you can if you have a Windows server hosted in the cloud somewhere and you've got, you can query it through WMI, then there's no reason you couldn't collect the log information from that server just like you would a server locally on your LAN or on another segment of your LAN.
Bumir also has two other follow-up questions that I'm going to go ahead and just address real quick. One was, he asked, is there a limit to the amount of data that we log and index? And Bumir, the context there was he uses another product that actually is licensed based on how much data. So the answer there, Bumir, is we don't have a limit. The only limit is based on really the storage space when you pull those logs in. So if you have a proper management plan put in place where you're moving data off of the server that's hosting the consolidated logs and whatnot, there's no limit whatsoever on our product. Ours is just purely the number of instances of installs and the number of nodes being monitored. But he's got another part, Jack, that I'd like you to answer real quick. And he says, is the data that's pulled into the system, presuming he means pulled into Server Manager, altered in the storage database?
In the storage database, yes, we're not storing it in its native format. We're taking the entries from the event logs and we're storing them into the database. So in our own, in kind of our own format, the information is just stored in the tables there. What you can do with Server Manager, one of the templates that we kind of overlooked earlier, is event log file backup. And what this template can do is it can go out to the servers that you're collecting event log information from, and it can actually retrieve the EVT files and the EVTX files, those native event logs. And it can store them then in a share or a folder on your Server Manager, so wherever you want. You're backing those up, saving those. It can compress them. It can zip. It can also password protect them. And if you have a certificate, it can digitally sign those. And they can be stored, again, for however long you want to store them, limited only by the amount of disk space you have. And you can tell Server Manager to delete them after a certain period of time if you want. But what's great about that is if you ever do need those event logs from a period of time in their native format that you could load right back into Event Viewer or even some other application. We don't want you to be tied to a specific vendor, so if you want to down the road switch to something else, if that ends up being the case or whatever, you can take those event log files with you. You have them in their native format. They can be protected from tampering, and you can utilize them that way for long-term storage purposes if that's what you need. And then sometimes for certain investigations or litigation requirements or whatever, you might need those log files in their native format, and we can certainly collect them that way for you.
So the next question is from Patrick, and Patrick is asking about Mac server support. So I can start some of the answer, and you can maybe give some examples of where we could still take advantage of it. So Patrick, the short answer is there's no native support for Mac servers. That's because most of the stuff that Jack is doing here is using WMI, Windows Management Instrumentation. That's a Microsoft technology. But things like where you see, even on the screen Jack's got towards the bottom, where you have internet server monitors, where we could do a ping. If they've got specific known services like IMAP and POP3 and so on, those things we could all at least go test connectivity and service availability. Because they're using standardized protocols, that can all be done, but not native for like connecting to a Mac server, let's say, pulling up how much disk space is left or something like that. So, Jack, anything to add to that, or is that that kind of covers it?
Can a Mac server share a folder out for Windows, like a Windows file sharing type of thing?
I don't know. Maybe Patrick can. How much?
I don't know.
How much can it look like a Windows server?
Mac servers, but Linux can. So, and what's cool about that is if it's able to, it can query a share. If it's seen by Windows as //server/share, and Windows user can store things there, then we can also query that and see how much disk space is available to that share. I have an example in my lab where I am querying disk space against a Linux server. It's not a Windows server, but the disk is shared out through Samba, which mimics Windows for file sharing, and I am able to see how much space is available on that particular Linux share. So that might be an option too. I do not know. I'll be honest. I'm completely ignorant when it comes to Mac servers.
There's another follow-up question from Marty, which is similar, Jack, and it's what operating systems does it support. We've obviously covered the Windows stuff with WMI, all the native stuff. You're obviously hinting to the whole, if you're running Samba or something that looks like a Windows box, it's somewhat accessible there. But
sure, and you've also got other services that are run on Linux servers. I am testing connectivity to a public mail. My ISP is Cox, and they run POP and SMTP servers on, I think, a Linux server out there somewhere, and I can connect to that and verify that that's up and running. That's OS. It doesn't matter what the OS is because we're using native networking protocols. I'm also able to check an FTP server and measure the throughput to that FTP server. Doesn't matter where that's hosted. I've got a MySQL monitor here that's the same as the SQL monitor we were looking at earlier, where it runs a query against that MySQL server, but this MySQL server that I'm querying against is on a Linux box. We can also do log consolidation, by the way, from Linux servers if you want to do that. You just set those Linux servers so that instead of, or in addition to logging to files in their file system, Linux servers do have the ability to log all of their information to a syslog server, and we can collect that in Server Manager. Another thing that I've done, I was on this screen earlier. This is my live feed of the syslog, incoming syslog message. All of these right here are actually file system audits from a Linux server in my lab. On Samba, I have set it to audit changes in the file system. So here what it's showing is the administrator created a file called ms02.html, and it's sending that over to Server Manager. So I'm actually doing some, on a share on a Linux server, when users are reading and writing and deleting files, I'm auditing that information in Server Manager by utilizing some of the configuration settings that are available in Samba, and then forwarding the logs from that Linux server over to my syslog server. So there are some neat things that you can do with the right configuration.
The last question we got, and then we're going to go ahead and close this out. Mike asks, can Server Manager be configured to encrypt packets?
I am not certain if the communications are encrypted. The WMI stuff, I'm not even sure if that supports encryption, to be honest with you. I do not know if I knew specifically what you're referring to. If you're talking about everything that it does, that would be probably not, because there are different, like if we're pinging a server, for example, there's no encryption associated with ping, necessarily. And then if we're checking a mail server, I do believe that it will support encrypting your credentials to connect to that mail server to test it and things like that. But generally, I don't believe that there is encryption there. If Mike can send me if he wants to send me an email or something with the specifics around that question, like what packets you're specifically referring to, I have no problem reaching out to the developer, our lead developer on the product, and running your questions by him.
Cool. So just to recap, I appreciate everyone's time today. A bunch of you have stayed on really long. We really appreciate the questions, so we could answer those. Just to kind of recap real quick, we do have that 20-day evaluation of a Server Manager available at SpectorSoft.com. And then be sure to give us a call. Contact Jack if you have any questions. Jack will be the one, if you do an eval, he'll be the one that gets the lead anyways. I'll be happy to give you a call. And we hope to hear from you guys soon. So thanks for your time today, and we'll catch you on the next webinar.
Thank you very much.